and you're kind of blindly trusting whoever you use as an agent. And sometimes they're great and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they recommend you to a lender because they're amazing. And sometimes they recommend you to a lender because that lender is paying for half of their Zillow fees.
Welcome back to Life at 10 Cents, where we inspire you to live at the pinnacle of your ability and purpose. Today we have Wendy Gilch. I have messed up her name twice now, so we are on a roll. We are getting this thing rolling. Wendy, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you on. So a little bit of background as we get Wendy kind of set up here. Wendy is the founder of Selling Later, and she's a consumer advocate for the real estate world. And I'm super excited. We're gonna go down a kind of a different path today. A lot of times we'll interview people in the real estate industry that are realtors and the successes that they're having. And you were introduced to me by a really dear friend of mine, Jen Egbert. She got a hold of me and said, you should interview Wendy. And we had an amazing conversation the other day. And when we got done with it, I was like, yes, we need to do this because you have really put a lot of time and effort in your world into really kind of looking at the real estate industry and saying someone needs to stand up for the consumer side of this here, and someone needs to help them make sure that they are getting the support and understanding what's going on behind the scenes. And I'm so grateful to have you. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Getting my name right. We're on a roll.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, it took me a couple tries there, but
Okay.
Couple of replays that'll go in the blooper reel for
yeah,
sure.
there's a blooper reel on this one already.
Yep.
Wendy, it's so great to have you. I'm really excited to dive into the story behind how you came about founding Selling Later and grew in this role that I think a lot of people don't even know exists. I know consumer advocacy is out there for a lot of things, and there's a lot of people in policy and in DC that will advocate. Mostly they're associated though with the National Association of Realtors when they're looking for, those lobbyists that are pushing for things. But there's not a lot of people who are just out there trying to generally educate consumers about this. And from what I understand, that's exactly what you do.
Yeah, I didn't mean to. I kind of gradually fell into it. I had mentioned to Garrett, when I first started Selling Later, I was just a frustrated home seller that couldn't time buying and selling. And I wasn't trying to be Compass, right? Like, it wasn't about having pocket listings. It wasn't about that. It was, sorry. It wasn't about having pocket listings. It was just about, I know a year ahead, I'm going to sell my home. Why can't I just tell people and just collect names while I'm waiting? That was the sole purpose. And I got invited to Inman's New Kids on the Block. This was, I think, 2019, right before COVID. And I stood on stage and told the whole audience at Inman how everyone should know when homes are selling. And I don't know what else. I blacked out. I don't know what I said for 60 seconds. But afterwards, I had known a few people through Geek Estate and Drew Myers. And we were talking afterwards. And the head of Boomtown at that time came up to me and he's like, hey, you should do referral fees. You could make so much money. And I legit had to turn and say to someone, what's a referral fee? I didn't know. I was so green. And I'm like, if I don't understand this stuff, the average consumer doesn't. And so I guess since then, I've just been learning from some wonderful people and really trying to take what consumers don't understand or how things work or how companies make money and educate them so that they're making the best choice for however they choose to buy or sell.
And Wendy, so when we were talking before, I think one of the things that I think is important is that you did not go down the route, though, at least currently right now, of taking referral fees.
Oh, I will not.
Yeah,
that is my hill to die on. And unfortunately, that is not a popular answer. Because originally I was like, maybe I need to get investors to really change some things. And that was one of the first questions is well, you're going to do referral fees. You're leaving money on the table. And that's not my money. That's the consumers, I feel like. And honestly, there's a lot of conversations now about with the NAR settlement kind of being packaged up and we're moving on. Is that going to be the next lawsuit? Which is a good question because I think that a lot of these referral fees aren't really explained to consumers. A lot of the best agent websites don't explain really how they're making money. And if a buyer is now like, hey, I got to pay this, they probably have a right to know, like the agent that I just found on Zillow is paying them 40%, you know?
Well, and it's
Go ahead.
interesting too. I've talked to a lot of consumers, Wendy, that when they find out sometimes that part of their commission is going to another person that they did not expect, and that's even like
Hmm.
realtor to realtor in an office
Yep.
sometimes where they maybe had a relationship with somebody, and then all of a sudden there's a new agent that's now handling their business, and the agent will say, "Oh, by the way, a part of this is going to so and so over here because of your relationship with them," and the client goes, "Wait a second, like that's." Like, why would my money be going to them? I'm not comfortable with
Yeah.
that. And the agent thought they were doing a good thing. They thought they were. So I think it needs to be understood better. So I think there's definitely like gray areas in there where it's like, wait, what's happening with my money?
Yeah. And I think that there's many pockets in real estate where there's money being exchanged or maybe something that might cost you more based on how you went about it, that as a consumer, like you just don't know. You have no idea. And you're kind of blindly trusting whoever you use as an agent. And sometimes they're great and sometimes they're not. You know, sometimes they recommend you to a lender because they're amazing. And sometimes they recommend you to a lender because that lender is paying for half of their Zillow fees, you know? And I just don't think consumers have any idea that that stuff goes on.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, there's a lot of angles we can dive right
Oh
into. I
yeah.
want to learn a little bit more about this because you said you started this whole journey as a frustrated seller, future seller, and buyer. So tell us a little bit about that story, how that kind of manifested for you. What was the role that agents played in that kind of world for you, and what led you to actually starting sellinglater.com, and what exactly is it?
Yeah, we were building a home, and this was actually 12 years ago that I thought about this. We were building a home, and it was going to take, I think, 8 months at this point. And we had a townhouse, and we couldn't figure out like how do we time this. So we ended up selling it early and living with my parents, which is great. Like I get along great with my parents. We didn't have kids at that point, and we had one dog, so it wasn't horrible. But like moving twice, I'm just like, this shouldn't be that hard. And we did use a real estate agent for our new construction, but I can see how sometimes consumers might wonder, like, it didn't feel very hands-on for me.
Yeah, new
So
construction can feel like that for sure.
yeah, right.
And
And I
Matt
felt
knows
like we
that.
were there often. And then I had no idea like what she was being paid until actually until last year when because my husband keeps all the paperwork, I actually got to see what she got paid. Like it just was never a conversation, but sorry,
Which is crazy because you hire somebody to do a job for you.
right.
And I think this is one of the benefits that has come out of this whole NAR lawsuit thing is like you hire somebody to do a job, but you never talk about what you're going to be paying that person, even if it is built into the price. Like,
Right.
I don't think people necessarily care a whole lot about the dollar amount. It's more of, well, understanding the total value and how that works. Right. So anyway, go on, please.
Yeah. So it was funny. So for years, like we moved into our home and I always thought about it and I was like, I'm not in real estate. Like, why would I do that? And I remember going to this like motivational speaker and I don't know what happened to me, but I was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to do it. Like, I'm just going to do it. And like totally naive, yeah, sure. Let me enter like the Porter Wars. Like that's the dumbest ambition, right? Like you have homes.com with $1 billion and here I am with my little homemade platform. And, I think at some point we had about 200 sellers and it was just me. Like I was doing everything and just kind of helping educate. And that's where it started to click for me. It's like these people have no idea what's going on and they have no idea what they should be doing. And they have no idea that there are some really great agents out here and there are some awful ones. And how would they even know how to decipher that? Like, how do you find them? How do you know what to look for?
And Wendy, I think it's really important what you just said is that there are some really great agents out here and there's some really crappy ones. And this is, I think your stance on this, which I love, is it's not all realtors are bad. I got to figure out a way to like kind of like help the public. It's like,
I just want to make sure everybody heard you say that because on TikTok, I'm constantly getting, you hate agents and you're being what is it? You always talk down about them. And I was like, no, like these are actual consumer experiences that are happening. Like that, I don't make up stories. Like I never post anything if I don't have the validation, the buyer, the seller it happened to, the printed out script. Like I have screenshots out the wazoo of everything you could ever imagine. Like I have to upgrade my phone for my data because my iCloud storage because I'm over big time. But I get that a lot, like you're anti-agent. And it's like, I think people have a hard time realizing that there can be a position where people aren't like the cheerleader for realtors. Like that's NAR's job. Like that's for you guys to help people navigate, you know, and I just want to be the cheerleader for consumers to help make sure that they're protected and not taken advantage of and not overpaying because some website said they're going to help them, you know?
Well, the
And
spectrum.
realtors need to understand they live in their own world, and if they're good, they live in the world of agents are great, right? And they don't see those stories unless people like you share them, because the agents that are not doing well aren't on Instagram and TikTok, and they're not.
Some
I
of
mean,
them
some
are.
of them are,
Some of them are,
but
yeah.
but they're not all up on these stages and things. And so the realtors get the you know the fun, high quality internal view of themselves in their industry, and they don't necessarily always see until stats come out that show like, oh, 71% of agents didn't do a deal in 2024, or you know, and then another 10, 12, 15% did 1 to 5 deals or things like that, where the experience level just isn't there. And let's just be honest. I mean, the leadership and the training is also not there across the board to make sure that when people enter the industry, they're prepared to really run great processes. And realtors need to acknowledge that. And the good one, I think they're the good ones do, and then they develop great processes and practices. So
Yeah, and I've made some great friends with some real estate agents and brokers.
well, that's why you're here,
Yeah, I was
right?
gonna
Because
say,
Who literally, because of Jennifer, right? Who, and it's not necessarily Jennifer, but like I have every week in my DMs, like an agent sending me, like, look what this person did. Like, look what they're charging their client. Look what this person did. And this person's breaking the settlement rule. Look what they're doing. And it's like, so I see it all the time. So I'm sure I can come off a little more aggressive and frustrated. But I get that stuff all the time because I think a big issue is people are afraid to report. You don't want retaliation.
Yeah.
You don't want to deal with it, right? So I kind of have become their like little, like if they don't want to do it, I'll do it. I'll do it for you. I don't care. They can't get mad at me. Like,
I watched
sure,
the
send it to me.
breakdown happen. You know, it was interesting when the whole settlement was happening and all that was going through. And it was funny. I would talk to agents and they'd be like, well, everybody knows that the fees are negotiable and there's no standards and all this stuff. And I was like, well, you don't have to go very far. And I was having conversations with people like, but you don't understand, that is a standard fee. And I was like, wait a second, like this is the problem. Like nobody has a clear idea, but you're right, Matt, just as you said, if you're in one camp over here running as a very professional realtor, you don't see all the other stuff a lot of times behind the scenes and kind of what's going on. That's actually where the problems are happening. And I think this is where having the consumer advocate out there kind of being a kind of a third person that's kind of detached from all this, basically saying, hey, I can help you. So let's talk a little bit about what does that look like? Like you obviously started this selling later. You have 200 homes on here that, and I don't know where that is today.
Right. So we actually, I started to move away from the marketplace because in my head, I didn't want to contribute to pocket listings. But I also didn't feel like I had a big enough exposure to really get users enough attention. And there just seemed like so many bigger issues that needed to be solved. So I actually took a break from that and just started pivoting to the educational side of things.
And how does that work? Like where did it come in where you're like, all right, cool, I'm going to go into this education channel. So what were the things that kind of cropped up for you to get into that space? Was it consumers coming to you and asking you questions? And then how did you start to play that role for them?
Yeah. You know, it just kind of happened gradually based on who I started talking to. And it's funny, like it seems so long, but you know, I guess it's been about 6 years and I've like forgotten half the stuff at this point of how I even got here. But it's mostly just been other industry outsiders that I got to learn from and other like brokers, people that actually want to see change and want to make sure that consumers protected. You just started to learn from them. I did different programs, different research things for different groups that were working on like new models and how does this work? What's this look like? And, eventually selling later kind of changed to more of a trying to highlight better real estate agents and trying to highlight attorneys and looking at however you choose to buy or sell, like how can we help guide you to people without taking a referral fee.
Right.
But it actually, it pivoted a little more because then I was like, you know what? A lot of buyers have trouble with their loan estimate. So we started to do a loan estimate review program where I have about 12 lenders that sit on this panel and people can post their loan estimate and they can just ask questions. The lenders can respond and say, hey, this is like really high. You maybe should look at this loan instead and just kind of give them that unbiased help because it's not there. It's so easy to Google to look for something and just be hit with those top corporations that just
For sure.
want your money, you know?
Yeah, it becomes this place where if you have the money to pay for the advertising, you're going to get put in front of, and that's why we focus so much on relationships, because if you want to beat the lead machine, you need to be the thing that stands between the consumer and the lead, which is having a really good, trustworthy relationship, right?
Right.
So what are some of the things that you look for then when you're saying, okay, I want to help? Because it seems like there's multiple layers here. One of how do we just help buyers and sellers understand what this process could look like, how they might want to prepare to engage in it, and then how do we identify a quality professional? So looking at that side first, like how do you identify who is a good real estate agent, who's a good attorney, who's a good loan officer?
Yeah. So, I think a big part of it for loan officers is we notice that you really have no idea how many loans someone has closed. Like that's really hard to find for some reason online. So we partnered with a company who kind of helps us pull that data so we can tell consumers like how many FHA loans they've closed in the past 2 years. What about VA loans? And the same thing for real estate agents. Like, let's look at how many properties they've actually helped buy or sell and where. And then, like, what's their list to sell percentage? And how often are they sending buyers to the same mortgage lender? Because I feel like it might be because the lender's great, but you don't know that. And I think it's really important for consumers to shop around. So, are we flagging maybe agents that are consistently sending someone the same business over and over and over again? Because I do think there's variety in lenders, and I think it's important for consumers to be paying attention to that. So it's just trying to get more of the data, but it's just a very hard way to quantify like what makes a good agent, and because it's going to be also personal. So I think part of it's like we give them kind of the questions, like here's what we would ask, here's the kind of responses you should probably be looking for. But it kills me that there's so many like best agent websites and they're really like they literally have your phone, your email, and the zip code maybe you want to buy in, and they're going to match you with someone for based on those three things alone,
And it's mostly because the agent's paid to be on those sites. Like, hey, I'm a 5-star, not to, highlight 5-star agent, but like, no, I'm paying to like be on this site and all these things. And I think you're right. It is challenging because there's also so many factors, right? There's the buyers and sellers factor into those equations too, because maybe you have an agent who's great, but they just happen to have a string of tough clients that didn't want to make certain decisions or whatnot. And so I think it also comes down to like, are they ethical, right? Do they follow through? Do they have processes and things like that to highlight these things? So now on the buyer and seller side, like how do we prep buyers and sellers? Because I think there is this overwhelm that happens too. And so if they don't have a relationship with somebody they trust, then they get into this space of like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know. Like usually people are buying and selling because of a life change, right? Which creates a whole nother level of busyness. And then, we're going to just layer on this whole like process that is complicated, complex, and no matter how great your agent's going to be, you're going to have stress in there. So where do you start with home buyers and sellers to help them understand what they're about to engage in?
It's funny. We actually, when we first started, put like a monthly plan together. Like as you're leading up to this, like here's something to be focusing on. Like, here's something, whether it's the financial or getting the home ready, just to kind of get them, because it was selling later. They were with us for a while to kind of help make that a little bit easier and do it in chunks. But now, oh, this stupid cold. But now I feel like what's more important to me, and my whole platform is going to be getting an overhaul this year, because I feel like I need to be a little bit bolder. And by the way, I did a horrible job. I'm just thinking about this, explaining my background. I never mentioned that I help consumer advocates in American real estate, and I never mentioned I'm a fellow on the Consumer Policy Center.
Well, and
I was
that's new
hoping we were
too.
going
We
to come
definitely
back
want to talk
around to
about that
that.
because
Yeah, we'll have to come back, because you
Yeah.
were asking me about my background and I just blanked. It's so hard to think about 6 years and then just have it all come out. But anyways, as my company's kind of getting an overhaul, what I think is more important right now is explaining to consumers the settlement, and what they should be looking for from their agent, because there are two very different camps right now. There's, okay, cool, this is the settlement, this is how we're doing things now, let's go see homes, we'll negotiate it, let's go. And, oh, I can't get a number on commission, so we can just skip that home. Like, there are two very big camps right now, and consumers are not technically being advised correctly, depending on which agent they get from which camp.
that second camp is very, very dangerous place
Yeah.
to be, because that it's never that clear either, right? Agents aren't saying, "Oh, I can't get a number, so we're not seeing this home" or whatever. They could just not even be sharing that stuff, or they just may not be fully transparent on what's going on. I mean, let's hope most good agents, people that listen to this podcast, are like, "Yeah, I don't do that." Cool, that's great, but know what your
Yeah.
competition is out there too, so that you can help educate. Because I think part of what you do, Wendy, like, realtors should pay attention so that they can also take some of this stuff and help be an advocate for them too. I think that's one thing that NAR says that they're about, and I don't see it a lot in practice, which leads to
Yeah.
like what you're doing with care as well, right?
Right. Yeah. And I didn't know how bad the camps were, but there are a couple Facebook groups that are mighty big. And someone let me into one. I don't know why, but I'm constantly in there, like, screenshot. And it's wild. Like, the response is, well, I tell my buyers, like, if they're not paying, like, you have to pay me out of pocket. And I'm like, well, the response should be like, we'll put it with the offer. Like, let's negotiate and see what happens, because your offer was never guaranteed to be accepted to begin with. It's just one more layer of negotiation. And some people aren't doing that. And so you have buyers that are maybe missing certain homes just because the seller didn't want to commit a number up front. Doesn't mean they wouldn't. But, it doesn't mean they wouldn't. Like, try. That's your job. You're supposed to negotiate and help me strategize. And some people aren't doing that. And so, the past couple months, it's been a lot of educating consumers on, like, why did the settlement happen and what does it look like now? And explaining to them when they say, oh, I don't need a real estate agent, I can just go on Zillow. Like, explaining to them where Zillow gets their data from. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so many pieces that have been shifted and everybody's confused. And I think it's just important that consumers understand, not from NAR, because they have their own talking points, everything's rosy, from someone on the outside to explain what's going on.
So, Wendy, what does that look like when you're starting to educate a consumer, and somebody, let's say, reaches out to you and you're like, I want to kind of give you like all the things you should be looking at, the things you should be paying attention to. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of resources that we try to put out, articles explaining why things happened the way they did, programs with questions to ask your agent and explaining why you should be asking them. I mentioned earlier the loan estimate review program, even going further into like mortgages, where buyers can post their loan estimate anonymously and have lenders help them look at what they're actually paying. Like, oh, hey, there's like no taxes on here. That's going to get you later. Like, surprise. And just those key pieces, I feel like it's very easy to be misled depending on where you land on the internet. And so just creating a safe space for them, I think, is important right now. But I don't know if I need to be more ballsy, more bold. I don't know, because it's very hard to get the attention. Because I mean, look, homes.com has $1 billion to blow last year on ads that I must not be their demographic because I wasn't into them. I must not be who they were looking for. I don't know.
Well, it's hard too because the life cycle of someone looking to buy or sell a home is like when they're settled in a home, like they're not thinking about it then and there, right? And if they've already had an experience, they probably just assume that's how it goes. And when the time comes, you know, I don't know, maybe consumers do more research than I think, but I think that's also where you've also started this role with care.org, which is CAARE. .org. So tell us a little bit about that, because it seems like that avenue and what's coming out of that and the Consumer Policy Center could be some of the pathways to get out there a little bit more. Because let's be honest, most people are not going to have the money to compete against a homes.com, a Compass, and NAR in terms of like advertising dollars. But if there's more grassroots understanding, and maybe the pathway is through realtors.
Yeah, I feel like maybe I feel like our position is best needed like the year before you're getting involved with people, which is an interesting way to try to find those people. I have yet to crack that code.
Well,
I'm sure if
that's
someone
where
did, it
the
would
realtors have that. Like that's like a big thing of what Garrett and I coach agents on and help them with is like you should know your people well enough that you know when they're going to be potentially selling because of these life changes that are coming up. And we find that with a lot of people we work with, they'll know that people are going to be making a change well before they actually go and enter the marketplace.
For sure. Yeah, no, right. And I think a lot of our resources would be helpful for them through the realtor. I just always try to make sure that I don't cross the line of getting too knee deep into the industry. Getting too close with big companies. Like I feel like if I get too entrenched with realtors or too entrenched with big companies, it's very easy to lose the consumer perspective. I mean, I think like I have a pretty strong moral compass, but I really kind of enjoy staying outside the bubble because I'm able to really listen to what consumers are doing, like what's happening.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, so tell us about care.org and what that's all about and how that plays kind of the next level up role from selling later.
Yeah, so CARE's been around for a really long time. It was started by Doug Miller and a few other people. Actually, one person who helped start it had a kind of like a marketplace and actually was sharing a lot of, this was before the internet really was giving us all the data we wanted, was sharing like stats on realtors, like how well would they close at, how many, because I think this was like early 2000s. That wasn't really accessible. And he got sued out the wazoo by certain organizations who didn't want that information public. And that guy had an axe to grind. And so he helped get CARE started to just kind of give that outside consumer perspective with Doug Miller, which I know everybody knows Doug as kind of one of the people that was behind kind of the lawsuits and what's happening in the industry. I know he's not the most well-liked by some realtors, but he does have a genuinely good protective heart for consumers. And that's kind of really what he focuses on a lot. So I came on board, I've known him for years, and I came on board about a year and a half ago to kind of just help expand resources and help share that information that he's got years of stuff that has still true to this day. It's just kind of making sure that we get it out there. And the Consumer Policy Center is something that I started with Stephen Brobeck, who, boy, I'm saying a lot of times. I'm sorry. It's so annoying. I try to pay attention and I can hear it coming out. And I'm like, stop. See, I should have been more worried about saying than swearing, but we'll get to that.
I don't even think you've cursed yet once.
No, but I'm saying like every 5 seconds and I can hear myself. So
I think it's interesting as you're talking about like sharing this data on real estate agents and the transactions they've done and stuff like that. Matt and I were just joking about an episode the other day when we said, wouldn't it be funny if some of these stats were actually like days on market was like, posted so you could see like
But for the realtor, not for the homes.
Yeah, not for the homes, but here's what the realtor stats are. And I'm not saying that that is the answer, but it was one of those kind of funny things of like, how much information is out there? What do we have at our fingertips? And I think if you're going to be spending the amount of money you're spending on finding a good agent, like, well, what if we have the stats? Like, what's the
Show it.
harm in
Yeah.
basically being able to help somebody know they're getting somebody who's really good?
Yeah, we actually started, we called them real estate agent report cards. And people could send us a name and we would go through and pull the stats and kind of give them like, we would never say like use someone or don't use someone. It was more, hey, here are some things that we see. You might want to ask why this is too low. And you might just want to pay attention. They seem to use the same lender a lot. Just know you're within your right to be able to use whoever you want. But then I got pissed because agents were trying to get report cards off of other agents. I was like, don't waste my time. Like, come on. Like they have the data in the MLS to get some of this stuff. And you're going to try to ask us to make a report card for you about someone else. So that was annoying. But
like to use in a negotiation, like if they were like working, like let's say they were like sitting down for a listing appointment, they could actually pull out and say like, well, here's the other realtors report
I
cards.
think they were just being nosy. I have no idea.
Interesting. Okay.
And the person that had me pull up has more price drops on properties than I have ever seen in my lifetime. And then I told the person like, hey, like, I'm not sure what you're looking for. And then this person's like giving me excuses of why all these price drops. Like I've never seen so many price drops in my lifetime. I just, anyways, but so that data, I don't think consumers realize how to get that, or I don't know really if you can. And when you come up on teams, a lot of these agent websites, best agent websites, show you like the team lead and how they have like 200 closings last year or some astronomical stupid number. And the consumer thinks like, oh, I'm going to work with that person. And I'm thinking like, no, you're not. You are absolutely likely not going to be working with that team lead. You're going to be working with probably someone new or newer on the team because there's a 40% referral fee in here and someone's got to pay that. So like just stuff like that. It's just frustrating.
Maybe we need like the ESPN version of real estate where you can just go on, you can see all the stats of everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible. It needs money behind it, and
Yeah.
the money is not behind that space in real estate. And it's, I think part of the consumer advocacy route that you're on is also getting consumers to pay attention. I was having
Yeah.
a conversation with an agent yesterday about this potential lawsuit in Washington State where Compass sellers are suing Northwest MLS about their policy of not allowing private exclusives and saying that that's hurting them. And he said like, yeah, nobody is going to know about that. Probably nobody's going to pay attention to it. And it's one of these things where it's like it's an inside baseball. Like people in the industry are going to pay attention to it, but the consumer's probably never going to know. It's not going to necessarily change their experience. And it's just interesting when you look at that because, okay, well, if more consumers are aware, like if it is that important, like how do we get the consumer to pay attention? And I'm not quite sure how the best path of bringing that awareness, whether it's just getting on more news programs or things. Because I will say when things hit major news, that's when consumers pay attention. That's when I get the text from my dad like, hey, like, check out this story on this major news network about this NAR settlement. I was like, oh yeah, we've been following that for a year.
Yeah. What's interesting too is like, I don't know how it happened. I have no issue just blatantly emailing. I have emailed Craig Newmark from Craigslist, like just boldly like, hey, I have a question, like nicest guy ever. But in having that like attitude of like, hey, what's the worst thing they're going to do? Just delete my email. I have made such great relationships with like New York Times and Business Insider and even the one person at Business Insider. Every month I was like, hey, you should write about this. Here's some stuff to think about. And he'll be like, oh yeah. Like he made a great article about those home equity agreement programs that are going to be just, they're not the best for consumers. But it's been nice to build that relationship. So I'm able to talk through them sometimes. Like the New York Times article that came out. I want to share this because I hope this guy is listening. There was an agent who posted a video, and it was a buyer driving down the street. It was like a parody, right? And one person had a sign out that said 3%. And then he drove to the next home and the sign said 0%. And so his little character that was a buyer said, oh, hell no, and reversed his car and went to the 3% home. So obviously making an insinuation that like you better offer 3% or no one's going to see your home. And I had posted like a comment and said, hey, this is like one of the reasons that you got sued is having sellers think if they don't offer something, you're going to be in trouble. Like your broker is going to be pissed that you posted this. And his response was, maybe my broker has a sense of humor. So I said, all right, asshole. I sent that email to the New York Times and it made it into her article. And guess who deleted his video before the article came out? So, but to circle back to that, like, why does it have to get that far?
Yeah.
For someone to like, just take that down? Like, why would you do that? Or like, where is the broker to be watching what people are putting on social media to be like, hey, that's not a good idea and that's not correct. Like you should probably put that down.
Well, and I think that that's one of the challenges inside the industry is that the reins are down for a lot of people, and Matt and I'm grateful for this. Like we get to work with some incredible real estate agents in the industry. Like I will stand behind them that they are there for their client at the absolute highest level I've ever seen. It's because it's what I stand for, and it's what if I'm going to help them with their business, like I don't let them get away with some of that crazy stuff. And if I see that stuff online, it's like whoa,
Yeah.
like what are we doing? But there's a lot of them out there that aren't reined in and they don't have anybody directing them. And a lot of them are looking at their peers and they're going, oh, this is what we're supposed to do. Like this is how we're supposed to act. Like we're supposed to put these types of things out. And I think it just, once that ball gets rolling, it's really tough. And then for someone like you to come out and be able to go like, how do I get this message out? How do I share it? Like the platforms that it needs to get on to get out there, nobody wants to step in that. Like nobody wants to open up that door because it's like, I don't want to be connected with this.
Yeah. It's almost like having your head in the sand. Like I'm not doing anything wrong. So like, I'm good. But that's kind of how the industry and real estate agents got their reputation, right? Yeah. Because everyone just kind of focused on themselves and everybody knows a bad agent. Everybody knows it. And so it's like, well, at what point are you going to start being like, hey, I should probably report that person? And I know it's scary, but your reputation doesn't get better if these 1 point however many people out there with the realtor badge on are posting stupid stuff and doing stupid things, and everyone's just like, yep, not my problem.
So I'm curious with the report card. I want to go back to that for a second because I watched this come about oh gosh, probably about 10 years ago. There was a couple places that came out and they said, we're going to create a ranking system, a scale system where, people will be able to see how realtors rank out and who you're working with. And I feel like it like hit and everybody was like, oh, put all your information into it. You want to get ranked in there. You want to get that going. And it was like, shh, no. And everybody went running the other direction. It was like never mentioned of again. And so one is, I mean, obviously you're probably aware of that. And then where are you at with your realtor report cards and what's happening?
Yeah. I mean, I don't believe in ranking. I hope you don't, maybe you coach people this and I'm really sorry if I offend you, but people that talk about being the number one agent or top 10, top 1%, like nobody really cares, like it doesn't, great, you have a lot of sales.
So we're on the same page. I always tell people that's about you. That's not about the client. Like
okay, good. That has I was like, oh man, I don't want to offend them, but I'm going to say it.
We've done episodes on that before too.
Okay, good. Yeah, like it's just baloney.
And you know what? If they get offended, they get offended. I mean,
I'm not worried about that. I just didn't want to upset you guys because you had me on here so nicely.
You can offend us too. It's totally fine.
Oh, okay, great.
You can offend Matt.
So like I don't believe in like ranking. I just because you really don't know what like the consumer really needs. Like it's so individualized. So I don't think there should be like a ranking system. It should really just be like, here's the data and here's some things that we think you should probably look out for, some questions you should ask, and maybe here's some other people who are in that area as well that you might want to look at. But like that takes time and that takes some resources. So, that's like, part of...
It's like Better Business Bureau rankings, health
Right.
department rankings. It's not like we say this restaurant's better than this. It's like, boom, A. Like they've passed a certain things that says like this is an A restaurant or this is a D. You know, you might get a disease by eating here, just
Right.
so you know. They're still in
Right.
business
Right.
though, right?
Yeah.
And same thing with like a Better Business Bureau or anything like that. Like, and I think you're right. It does take time, but I think that is something that even if it's started at the brokerage level, it's probably time to have stuff like that just because of the speed at which data moves now. If and there's a lot of buyers and sellers that don't have a trusted advisor, as much as we coach people on that and like relationships are strong, like a lot of people don't have that. Even
Yeah.
great agents, like they can only maintain so many good relationships, right? There's
Right.
always going to be a lead out there, a consumer out there that is searching on the web and they just have no idea. And more as time goes on, they have less and less time to talk to people and get an understanding. And some agents are saying, well, competition is up in terms of like getting listings and buyers and stuff. And I understand that. But at the same point, like, do the consumers really understand? They're still making emotional decisions at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think my favorite place to hang out is the Reddit real estate forum, the first time home buyer forum. It's my favorite place to get a snapshot of what buyers are running into or like what questions they're asking. But it also concerns me because you have no idea who's responding to you. Like they'll post their loan estimate on there and all these random people with random names who you have no idea if they're even licensed are giving them advice. And that's why we made the loan program, because I was thinking like, shoot, if you're going to ask for advice, you should probably get it from someone who's like legally licensed to tell you what you're looking at instead of a random stranger. And so I hope as you know, my platform kind of evolves like that, those conversations that happen on Reddit can maybe happen more on my platform with people who actually do that work and not Joe Schmo 975 or whatever username they have.
Yeah. And I think too, not only are they professionals, but there's just a lot of people who like to chime in with thoughts. Like whenever I search for, you know, opinions on things, like Reddit's got it all. Like I tell people,
Yeah.
if you want to be confused, type a question into Google and get every answer that you could want and not want, and then realize that, oh my gosh, I just wanted to sell my house and now I have cancer. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
what
Or like
happened?
the fact that real estate laws can vary by state. And someone's like, yeah, like I think it was like a buyer rebate question. And someone was like, those are illegal. And I'm thinking,
Not in every state.
maybe in 9 states, but the other 41 are good to go. Like, I'm not sure where you live, but it's stuff like that. I think we just need to, I just want to create a safe space for consumers to be able to get the right information. That's just, again, not a very sexy pitch to investors and the people with the purse strings, right? Because that data is extremely valuable and I'm not going to sell consumers out. So it's my own little hill to die on, I guess. It's going to be, I'm up for the challenge. It'll be fine.
So to build out the platform of, let's say, trusted people, so that when you do want that question answered, I mean, obviously there's you, but then there's also a lot of really good realtors. There's a lot of really good lenders out there and brokers. And what are your thoughts about how you can create a safe place where people can come to and get connected with one of them? Is that am I hearing you correct?
Yeah. You know, what's funny is majority of the people that I have met and have a really good relationship, I met on TikTok. I have never been in the same room with them, but they're constantly putting out like the best, clear educational material. And then we would just start like chatting, like Jennifer, like we're constantly texting, especially about that wackadoodle guy in her area that I'm sure I don't want to say his name because I think he's going to get really excited about himself.
We've had a couple conversations about him.
Yeah, just,
Under the guise of he wants consumer advocacy too, right?
I mean, yeah, like listen, I'm going to cough. I'm sure everyone knows like who we're speaking of. And I don't ever want to hamper someone's initiative to build something that helps consumers. But the more I listen and watch, I'm just getting rich tech bro vibes. And
I want attention.
that never seems to meet the middle class everyday consumer experience in life and what they go through. So I'm just I'm over it. I don't watch the videos anymore. And I don't know.
There was the 15 minutes of fame, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
it
Yes.
happens.
And I just watched a bonfire being started, and it was like, I got to walk away from this. Like, this is
Yeah,
not. And I think
right.
It was so much fun to watch.
But
It was
like
fun for a second.
if journalists are saying that this person is what was their word? Difficult. If a journalist who wrote about you said you were difficult, I would assume it's maybe not going to, I don't know. I shouldn't be mean. I'm sorry. I shouldn't hamper.
But
but-
this comes back to the social media thing that you were mentioning about realtors. And I think that so much of what realtors see of like, I need to make these videos becomes these vanity metrics that they truly believe like that's what I need to do to get attention in order to help buyers and sellers. Like even the gentleman who did the 3%, 0% thing, which there's a lot of things wrong with that. But at the time, he probably wasn't thinking that that harms consumers. He was thinking, this is what I'm supposed to do to get attention so that I can actually help people. And that's what's weird is like, no, there's not people who are checking that. Like the broker owner is like, oh, well, my broker has a sense of humor. It's like, great. There's nothing wrong with humor. However, there's also something about accuracy and ethics and
or
actually
the settlement you
bringing
just
value.
paid like $70
Well,
million,
then
you know,
something
like,
about steering and
Right,
all
right.
that kind of stuff that comes into
right.
play. But
And I think what's important is, regardless of who you voted for, I think that consumer protection is hitting a very big gray area right now. And I think more than ever, there's got to be a space for consumers to safely navigate through this stuff. Because even now, we packaged up 25 companies who had illegal ads, like fake testimonials, all this stuff. And I was literally pounding on AG doors. I was trying to get a hold of the FTC, couldn't get a hold, like nobody responds. And it's scary that, I'm packaging up 25 companies for you who are literally breaking the rules of the FTC, like breaking the law, and nobody
this
does
isn't just
anything.
breaking an NAR
Yeah.
code of ethics.
Yeah.
This is
So again, I just got pissed. And so I went on LinkedIn and found the head of industry at TikTok and said, hey, buddy, here's a Google Drive of 25 companies that are illegally advertising testimonials that aren't real. Just wanted you to have it. And now 5 of those companies I don't see on the platform anymore. So at least like that's something. But it's scary to think as we move further into the next couple years, how hard is it going to be for consumers to get reimbursed or get protected? And because there are some scary programs out there that could put them in a major financial hole.
for sure.
Well, you'd made a comment that you don't feel like these lawsuits are done. I mean, and obviously, lawsuits is in the industry. We're going to have all kinds of stuff happen in the future. But in the act of trying to be transparent and share more information, again, you made the comment that what do you think the future looks like around this? Do you have any ideas or what your beliefs are?
You mean as far as like what kind of lawsuits or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the comment you said was you don't think these lawsuits are going to likely focus, or just be focused on something else kind of in the industry. What were you kind of going with that?
I think there's a lot of conversations about the joint venture companies, right? Like the agent who has a joint venture with a title company and the, and everyone's like, well, it's disclosed. And I'm like, yeah, well, so was like some stuff in your buyer agent contract that you had signed that you lost a lawsuit for anyways. That's probably something that's going to get looked at is, and you can see it with some of the companies that got sued before the CFPB went out, like the kickbacks between that one big broker and, they were pushing people to a certain lender and potentially exchanging things. So I think you should probably be really careful who you're sending clients to and why. I think referral fees will probably be an interesting thing to look at if they're not disclosed on most websites and told that they're free. I'm looking at you, Dave Ramsey, and your stupid website that says it's a free service, and it's not. It's not. I'm sorry. That man drives me nuts.
Well, it's a question about referral fees, and I'm just curious to
Yeah.
your thoughts
Yeah.
on this because I think there's wanting more transparency, and then there's how transparent can we get, right? So, for example, you go buy a product at the store, it's $10. We don't know where all that money is going. We don't know how much cut the retail stores making, how much the salesperson who brought that product to the store, how much the people who actually own the product are making, and all that kind of stuff. And so when it comes to something like referral fee, if it's not in addition to what a fee somebody would be paying somebody directly. Now, I totally understand the disclosure of how people get to certain places, but if I'm going to pay X dollars to have Garrett represent me, anyway, because that's the agreement that he and I make together, and that's fully transparent on what I'm paying him. What he does with how he gets paid, does that really matter for me as the consumer?
I mean, I think it matters if they're able to show that buyers and sellers paid higher commissions because of a website that was supposed to help them and didn't explain how they were making money. I think that could probably be one avenue. I understand what you're saying, but I
Right.
feel
So if
like,
it is something like what you're basically saying is like understanding, like, is this inflating, to have better understanding, like, are these fees inflating commissions
right.
and prices, and, or are they not? And I think that's a very, it's interesting. I mean, I think it's fascinating because it's a really hard thing to understand, because even if you just go to the product level, like, why is one cup more expensive than the other cup just because it has a brand name on it? Like, is that kind of thing. And the
Yeah.
question is, like, well, with products, consumers have transparency. They can choose easier between these things. So
Right.
is it limiting access and thus so there's a whole.
There is, but I think the hard part is comparing real estate to a product is like you need shelter, whether it's renting or buying, like it's a necessity.
Sure.
And I think that's probably where I struggle a little bit is I get, we need capitalism. I get it. But there's so many companies in this ecosystem of real estate that are making so much money that maybe it's not really a necessary need for consumers or for agents. And you have to start to kind of take a step back, I think, and look at somewhere in the middle, right? Like, this is a necessity. I get it's also a business, but like, there's got to be
Well, the
a
real
connection
estate is
there.
a necessity, right? The service. And I think this gets into what Garrett and I have talked about a lot offline and a few bits on our new podcast is an association that basically controls the entirety of the service for this basic human need. Is there too much ownership over that service where, like, the whole reason why you started selling later? It's like, well, if people want another place to go to get exposure, they can. Even the gentleman who shall not be named, his whole fight with Zillow of getting access, which now I've seen pretty much nationwide, Zillow now shows you can check and have buy.
Hold on. I got to clarify this because that also pissed me off. Zillow.
I'm not saying he did it. I'm just saying
I know, but
talked
he's
about
taking credit for it. And I just want to make this totally clear. There was an email that went out at the end of 2024 by Zillow to certain people that said, hey, we're making these changes. It's already on some mobile. We're working on the desktop changes for all of the MLSs that are going to allow us to put for sale by owner back together, which I think they said at that point was 3/4 of them. So they were already doing that.
Yeah,
And
it's
this
not a
gentleman
flip of a
is
switch.
this
He's taking
gentleman's
credit
like
for it.
thinking, yeah, he's taking credit for the whole thing. So I want to make that very clear. Like, they were already doing this. So go ahead. Sorry.
My point in highlighting that was just that there's bringing another avenue for people to have access where, before that was separate, right? And like Zillow working with the MLSs too, it's kind of like, well, why, and I get it. Zillow's a for-profit business too. They don't have to, they're not they're a public portal, but they're a for-profit. They're not a nonprofit, so they don't have to abide by certain things. But it is interesting, when you have so much control over distribution, is that just kind of the root of the problem? Is there just too much control over distribution and access to different options for people versus how it works inside the organization, so to speak?
Yeah, and there's a lot of questions, I think, from the consumer side, like what do we need from the MLS, or like what does an MLS look like if it's more of a, I don't want to say a public utility, but if an MLS was more created in an ecosystem where everybody was able to access stuff, what does that look like? Would a seller pay to, I mean, they pay an agent. I don't know. There's things you can talk about, but I think that we're entering into the next probably 5 years of lawsuits and changes and stuff like this will probably be questioned, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I think you look at like, and we've talked about like the MLS side, like who is that benefiting, and the information that's put on there, who is that benefiting? There's information on there that I can easily look at and say, as a seller, I wish it wasn't shared, because it's not helpful to me as a seller. And there's information in there that, well, again, is that benefiting the realtors or is it benefiting the consumers? And I think that's it. It's an interesting place to kind of take a look at. And I think, as you said, these are not done yet. These lawsuits is that.
No.
I see plenty of relationships out there where, you'll watch a realtor that'll link arms with a lender in town, and they're like, hey, let's support each other, and we'll send business back and forth, and you'll be my realtor I'll send to, and you'll be my lender I send to. And it's like, is that the best for the consumer?
Right.
Building that type of relationship, and then should those relationships be allowed? I mean, I understand there's always business working relationships, but the way that it's said and the way that it's shared and the way that the consumer learns about it, that's the stuff that I think we have to be really careful about, and
Right.
and
And
watching out for the consumer.
that's the scariest part. And I think it comes back to how we're saying, like, people just stick their head in the sand and the brokers are ignoring it. The consumers getting their information in the process from their real estate agent, right? And so if they have a good one, like, they're going to be great. But if they don't, like, that's who's funneling them information. Because you have these agents that are like, well, my buyers told me we're going to skip that home because it's not paying me. And I'm like, okay, well, how did you phrase that to your buyer? Because I feel like if you would have phrased it differently, they wouldn't be skipping that home. So, I think that there's got to be some sort of come to Jesus awakening that we should probably be doing a better job at reporting people, holding people accountable, and stop recruiting these like masses of asses, and like actually, well, like actually, actually look for people that like, want to do a good job. Like, your reputation would go up. Like, I know NAR loves their due money, but I don't think it worked out the way they thought it would. So
And why not help people build a true business? Because I think agents get, like, humans are humans, and if they're like, man, I'm not going to go work for free. Like, I can't. Like, I got to feed my kids. And I was like, I get that. So why not build a better business structure so that it's not a question of whether you're going to be paid or not, and how do certain things. And the individual agent can only do so much on their own to impact certain things. And so the changes that are coming through, the lawsuits that happen, they're going to happen, and how you adapt with that. So what would be your advice for, advisors, for agents, for lenders, for those people to do a better job so that as changes come through, they are seen like by organizations, that you're participating in as, hey, this is a true trusted advisor. This is somebody who you can trust, who operates in a great way and has the consumer's well-being in mind first.
yeah, I think understanding the settlement and like stop calling it bullshit, because I still see that, like, accept it, learn it, understand how we got here, and look at how you can do better and educate consumers. I think that's probably one of the biggest current ones. But more importantly, if you have those partnerships and relationships, always giving consumer choices, I think, is really important. Because if they don't feel like they have a choice, it's going to come back to you, and it's not going to be a good thing. I think that's really important too.
Makes a lot of sense, for sure.
Well, I think in going back to all this, where we started this whole thing off, is that I think it's really important, as you said, you're happy that I mentioned it up front, is that you're not against realtors out here. And you're really, I think that you were brought to me by a very strong realtor, which is Jen Egbert, who, I've worked with her for, I can't tell you how many years, and I've watched her stand up for her clients and go to bat for them in ways that I'm blown away by. And I think for your standpoint is that you want the bar to be raised, and you want to be able to protect these clients, is what I was watching. This is why I'm so grateful that we got to have you on today.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's my job to tell a consumer how they should buy or sell. I just think it's important to give. You have NAR, who had billions of dollars to put in front of consumers as to why you need an agent. So, like, that's not my job. But I think we can give them the right resources, and again, let them make choices that work for them. And if I can find a way to, when they do want to go that agent route, figure out how we get rid of the morons, because it's not hard. It's not hard to stay in business, at least for a little bit, And it's frustrating because I hear people say, well, like usually bad agents get out of here within 5 years. So, but how many clients did they have in those 5 years, right? Who did they work with? Who'd they talk to? Because those consumers had a bad experience. So instead of just knowing eventually they'll go away, like get rid of them now, like just clean house
Or
and start over.
Or I would say raise the bar for the education level for some,
Oh
because
my
I think that's Matt and I have had lots of conversations that some of these agents that are out here causing trouble, there's a lack of education that's been given to them, and you don't know what you don't know, and you don't even know what to go get educated in if somebody's not saying, hey, you need to go read this book, you need to go talk to this person, you need to go to this class.
Right.
And I think that's another kind of underlying issue is that there's just the reins have been let go a lot. And so that person that, 5 years in has maybe caused some trouble, probably had the chance of being a really good realtor and a really good advocate. They just weren't given the right direction up front.
Right.
And I think that there's other people that need to kind of take accountability for that too.
Yeah. And I mentioned this to you before. It seems like it's not hard to start up your own real estate coaching business. And there are quite a few. I'm not saying, I didn't mean that like against you guys, but
No, you're right.
it seems like there's a lot of coaching business and some of the things that I've seen some of these coaches say, I was like, oh, good Lord. Like if that's what you're telling all these people that are paying you, like they're going to be in so much legal mess because of how you're explaining stuff. So like, I always tell consumers to trust your gut. So I feel like even as an agent, like if you feel like perhaps maybe even if it's your broker that's leading you wrong, like you can always reach out to Care. You can reach out to me. Like at any time, like I have no problem keeping things confidential. If you only saw my screenshots and my little folder of evidence, but I know the risk it is to put your face out there and complain about someone else or report somebody. So, I try to make sure that I keep that stuff confidential because I think it's important to start cutting some people out.
Yeah, the consumer education piece I think is huge, and we've talked about it a lot. And I even think NAR has missed big opportunities for just great consumer education. I mean, that's what they're about, and you don't see a lot. They're not competing with Homes.com and people like that for just good value out there. And because whether the barrier is high or low to get into it, I have a good friend who's in healthcare advocacy. Doctors and people in the medical field go through lots of education and training, and there's still a ton of consumer issues and challenges because people just blindly say, well, they're a doctor, so they should know. And I saw a post today that said, your future doctor is passing medical school using ChatGPT, so you better start exercising and eating well.
Yeah.
And it's we've gotten to a place where, and maybe it's a great thing where consumers are more comfortable in trusting in things, but having really good consumer education out there so we can individually take responsibility for ourselves to make great decisions is going to help as well. And, it's not like we should put it on the consumers, but what you're doing to help educate consumers, it will help it be in their court so that they know when they're talking to an agent, is this person good or not? They'll have a better gut feeling about it, I think.
Right. And the reality is once you close, you're on your own. I know that some agents are obviously keep the relationship going, but
yeah, but
when
you
your
own the house,
contract's
like it's
done,
your responsibility,
yeah. So if it's too late when you close to be like, oh, I wish I would have known that, or I wish I would have not skipped an inspection because that's, God, please don't do that, people. It's stuff like that. I think, the agent gets to walk away. Not that the really good ones obviously would stay and help, but some of these bad ones, like the consumer is just left with a home with issues or
good ones
a
do
mortgage
too.
payment that they
get
thought they could
overwhelmed,
take.
they just walk away,
Yeah.
Wendy, you talked about skipping inspections, and when we got into the habit of, I was hearing realtors educate their clients on, if you're going to have a chance at this, you got to skip your inspection. And I'm like, that's not necessarily like, you need to say you have this as an option to skip your inspection, but you can't tell them to skip their inspection if they're going to, want to. I kept saying, this is going to come back and bite you guys if you're not careful. Like, you're going to have somebody in 5 years that goes to sell their house, and it's going to have major issues. Like, this isn't going to go away.
Oh yeah. There was a buyer who reached out to me whose agent told them they have to skip the inspection in order to get the offer done. Like, that's what you have to do. And after they moved in, there are so many issues. The flipper, it was a flipped house of everything. Like, why would you tell them that? Removed a load bearing wall. And they didn't know that.
Those are optional though. I mean,
Well, I mean, it's okay to have a staggy
And
roof.
this
No
gets
big
into
deal.
the language, like, and they say, well, I didn't say that they should. I just
But
told
that's
them
what
that
happened,
that's how
right?
they would get the house. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, how you present things matters, right?
Yeah, but that's the problem. Like, oh, well, the agent's telling me I signed a disclosure waiving my rights because I knew I shouldn't skip an inspection. But she literally told me I have to. So then it's her word versus the buyer. And now this buyer's going to have to put like $200,000 into a home they paid $300,000 for, and they can't afford it, you know?
So this is where having a consumer advocate, I think, is really important. And Matt, you'd mentioned the healthcare industry, and I started, kind of putting it together as like, there are things that we only do a handful of times in our lifetime that are massive. And, I had to go fight with the local hospital here, a couple years back because my son had an appendectomy, and we basically insurance wise, everything went sideways. And I would have loved to have had somebody standing in my corner going, no, you should be asking these questions. You should be, approaching it this way. No, don't talk to that person. You need to go talk to this person over here because that's where the momentum's really going to start to happen.
Right.
To have somebody in your corner that can help you with that, because as consumers, we don't do this enough. We don't buy homes enough. We don't have to go in for surgery and fight for our bills and what we're, all that stuff enough. So I appreciate what you're doing in setting this up, because I do think there's a lot of pitfalls and there's a lot of bad situations that can happen. There's a lot of really great realtors, and there's also a lot of situations that you're like, oh my gosh, if I could have, it's one of the reasons I got into coaching. I wanted to help people have the most amazing realtors they could have around them and helping them grow their business, helping them be able to be successful in buying and selling real estate. And I got into it because I had a really bad experience as a consumer.
Yeah.
And
You
I
know
was
what's funny is some of the best agents I've ever talked to got into this role because they had a bad experience.
Yeah.
It's like the most common thing that I see is
Yep.
when I find out why they got into the business, it's because someone screwed them.
My wife,
they wanted to do
we
better.
didn't get necessarily like screwed, but both my wife and I walked away and we were like, oh my gosh, like, is this where the bar has been set? And one, this is where we said, let's get into real estate, because we're like, if that's how low the bar is set, like, we need to help this industry and we need to figure out how to raise the bar in this, which then led me into coaching, which then led me 20 years later to this. But I think that you don't have to look very far to find someone who's just winging it out there. And that's the hard part.
Yeah.
And that exists everywhere. And that's why it's awesome. There's people out there like you, Wendy, who are doing this, because even on the healthcare side, like a good friend of mine, his daughter, became ill. They went to the hospital and they said, yeah, she's got 2 months max.
Ah.
Right. And he was like, I'm not willing to accept that. Some people would. Like, the
Yeah.
doctor didn't say, hey, this is it. Go get some other opinions, because like they got a CYA, all that stuff, I'm sure. That was now 2 or 3 years ago,
Oh, wow.
because he went and got a second opinion, and her scans have been clear since they've been able. They was like, hey, she was misdiagnosed. There's actually an option here. And
wow.
that happens all the time in so many different industries. And if you're a professional and you resist the opportunity, because I get it too. Like, I understand why professionals may say, hey, this is going to make my job harder. But also just know that, hey, there's somebody out there who's going to go help you actually have better informed consumers, so that the people that you work with are actually going to be great clients because they're better informed. Like, I see it as a win for all professionals to say,
Right.
hey, like, you have somebody out here who's going to help educate consumers so that they can come to you better prepared, and you can still serve them at a high level. Because at the end of the day, it's not about educating somebody to do something on their own. I'm not going to perform my own brain surgery. Like, most people are not going to sell their own house because they don't have the time, the knowledge, the expertise to do it. They just want to make a good decision on who's going to help them do it. Right.
Yep.
So I appreciate it. So Wendy, what's next for you as you're advancing this stuff? You just started the Consumer Policy Center. You're a little over a year into your role at Care and everything. So like, what's the next step for you and everything that you're working on?
Yeah, it's really giving the Selling Later platform an overhaul is going to be my next labor of love. I'm a glutton for punishment, I suppose, because consumer advocacy is not the most well-paying position out there, and it's
And the
not the
portal
most
wars will certainly be
glamorous.
fun to get involved in too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that's the big thing I think right now is giving the platform a big overhaul because I've seen enough to know where some big problems are, and now it's just a matter of reconfiguring some things that we have and making it a little bit easier and simplify some things to make it easier for consumers to digest this overwhelming experience.
I love that. I love that. And
So-
if people want to find you, like where do they find you? Said you're big on TikTok. What are your handles? Where do people find where you're
I
at?
think majority of my handles are just later Wendy, Later Wendy. I don't know why I made those. Oop, hold on, whoa, what is happening here? My dog is about to lose his mind. Knocked my ring light over and everything. So, I think TikTok handle later Wendy. Pretty much every handle I have is later Wendy. It's probably the easiest way. I'm on LinkedIn. If you go on Selling Later, you can always shoot a message on the contact page. I'll get that too. I'm pretty much open to whoever needs to talk.
Awesome.
I'm pretty visible. You can Google me. I'll show up. You might not like all the things that show up. They're all appropriate, but sometimes you may not like everything that's
There may
said
be
about
a
the industry,
disagreement.
but it's conversations that have to be had.
Love it.
I love it. Well, Wendy, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking your time with us today, and I appreciate everything that you're doing in the industry. I'm grateful to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this has been awesome, Wendy. Well, thanks so much for joining us, folks. Thanks for tuning in and listening to this conversation. There's a lot more behind this. We could go on and on
God,
about
I
a
know.
lot of
I
this stuff.
kept looking at the clock. I'm like, oh man, I'm just.
And I was like, oh man, I have like 3 or 4 other questions that I want to get into. So we may have to do like another episode where we can debate certain things and maybe bring on a couple different positions to have some fun. That would be kind of cool, which would be new for us to do something like that, which would be great. But guys, let us know in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube. What are your thoughts? What would you like to see if you want to see more of this stuff? If you want to hear more about what's going on here and what your biggest takeaway is. If you're listening on an audio platform, head over to YouTube and drop those comments there since the audio platforms don't have that comment availability. And if you want to learn more about what Garrett and I are doing to help realtors be the kind of agents out there that advocacy programs would say, hey, these are good people. Come check us out at lifeat10tenths.com. You can learn about all of our programs there and what we can do to work with you guys. But Wendy, thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
And everybody have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.